And now I am recording. So we'll just do this from now on.
Okay.
Multiple recordings. So that's weird how it's your computer's not doing that. My computer's weird too. Like I said earlier, like my C drive, which is like my main drive for my computer, it's like, so I have a terabyte on my laptop, and only 100 gigs of that is in my C drive, and the rest is in my D drive, my secondary drive. It's like, I don't know. So I'm always having to readjust where things download and stuff like that. What's the bad word?
I just hate technology. So
Yeah. As you can see, whenever I'm typing, not that good either. All right. So yeah. For to the one other person here, Catherine, we're gonna wait till 6:05 for me to kick things off with some announcements, just so people can join in. So yeah.
Okay, no problem.
Now, Heather, where is the share?
It's down here, but you don't do it yet.
Yeah, but when I do, I share screen.
Mute yourself.
Yeah.
hi, Dr. Knight. How are you?
Good. I literally just got back from class.
Great. We usually wait till around just like 5 minutes or so to give people time to trickle in as they are doing. So we'll just wait a little
And,
while and then get started.
Okay. And Madison, when I go to speak, I just click on the share screen
Yep.
thing, and that will let my slides, which are already loaded, they'll
Yes.
appear.
Yep, at the
Sorry,
bottom, you
I'm
should see
familiar
that
with
green box with share screen also in green. You
Yeah.
click that and then we can see everything you see.
Rick, what you'll actually do is click share and then you'll see all the different documents and you'll select the PowerPoint.
Okay.
And
Which
you
is
highlight it.
minimized.
Right.
Okay.
It will show as you'll see a small image of it. And you click on it and hit share.
So I hit share again.
That first thing is taking you to sharing.
Should we
screen.
try it?
No.
You don't want to?
Hmm.
I
You
wonder
can
if we
try
should
now
try
while
it.
we're waiting if you want.
Okay. So let's see, host disable participant screen sharing. Does that mean you have
Oh,
to?
sorry. Yeah, that's my bad.
Hi, sorry to
Hey.
introduce myself earlier. Hey, hello, Mr. Knight. I'm Remy. We've met a few times before.
Yeah.
I'm the current president of the student chapter, and really excited to have you speaking for us tonight. I've been trying to get you to one of our meetings for so long now. It's super exciting.
I'm looking forward to it. So we're actually going to try this. So should I try again, Madison?
I think so. My settings are telling me that participants can share.
Okay. And now it's working. So I click on the talk.
There it goes.
So it shows.
Yep, we can all see your screen.
So should I go ahead and minimize this again then, you think?
Sure. Yep. Remy, our president who just said hi, is going to just quickly go over some things for our club. We're having an upcoming election ourselves, and then we will kick it over to you. And you'll do the same process.
All right. Yeah. Hi, Remy.
Yeah. All right. So it is 6:05. So I'll go ahead and start with our announcements right now. So thank you to everyone who is in here right now. We've got a super exciting meeting tonight. We're going to have Mr. Rick Knight speaking for us, and he is a very well-known figure within Warner College. If you've been there long enough, you probably heard his name. Or if you've been around the Colorado's state chapter of the Wildlife Society, you've probably heard his name thrown around, or you've probably heard him speak or talk to him. He's great. But firstly, I have a few announcements. So this Sunday, we're going to have our raptor monitoring project outing, where we meet at 9:45 a.m. in the forestry lot, and then we leave at 10 to head to Boyd Lake. That's our CPW project, where we monitor the raptors at Boyd Lake State Park and present them with all that data. That will be our last outing for the semester, because after that we have our Thanksgiving break and most people are going to be home after that. So we'll be stopping our outings from there, and in accordance with regulations that have been released within the past week or so, we are going to ask that for carpooling purposes, we're going to try to keep it half capacity, windows rolled down, but also to keep it to at a maximum 2 households of people within each car. And so we're trying to keep up with that. And my other announcement is we will be holding our student chapter elections on the 17th of November, our next meeting after this one. And a quick rundown of what our elections are is every November towards the end of the month, we hold our elections where any of our members are free to submit their, I guess, their running for our elections. And the way they work is we have officer positions and standing committees. Our officer positions include president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. And in running for an officer, the Wildlife Society does ask that those officers are members of the national chapter of TWS. And there's more information on what each of those positions are on the poll that will be sent out later. And then we have our standing committees, which include our membership committee, our programs and activities committee, our education information committee, and our fundraising committee. These ones you are not required to be a national member of TWS, but you are free to if you would like to. A ton of great resources come from registering yourself for that. But our standing committees, that's going to include people who run our social media pages and accounts. Programs and activities is going to include our raptor monitoring and any volunteer and work days that we would like to participate in. Our education information committee is going to include our camera trap project and communicating and working with schools around Fort Collins, and hopefully, fingers crossed, for next semester we can do some more school visits or school Zoom visits. And fundraising committee is going to include the responsibility of designing our merchandise, managing the coffee table that we run if we are able to run it next semester, and any other fundraising events that we may decide to hold in the future. And anyone is free to run for any of these positions as long as you are a current student at CSU. And once you are elected, we ask that you pay our yearly dues fees, which is just $15. And last little detail I'll mention is the fact that you can run for multiple positions, but you can only hold one officer position within the calendar year. That's how long these positions last. But you can be within one or more standing committees while also being an officer. And so, yeah, with that, the poll will be sent out in an email later tonight. And if you're at all interested, anyone who is a student of CSU is more than welcome to submit their wants to be within a standing committee or one of our officers, and we will contact you guys shortly. And you have until November 17th to submit yourself for that, and more details will come out in the coming weeks. So yeah, with that, that's enough me blabbering on about our elections and raptor monitoring. And if you've joined here in the past few minutes, this is our fifth meeting of the semester. And we are very lucky to have Mr. Rick Knight here speaking with us. And with that, I'll leave it to you.
Okay, thanks, Remy. I appreciate it. So I should share screen right now, right? And then click on the talk.
Yes.
Did I just lose it, Madison?
Nope, you got it. We can all see. And you can.
Oh, you can see it, but I can't.
Can you see your slideshow?
I can't.
You can't see your slideshow.
Interesting.
Zoom?
Here, let me see. I'm looking up here. I'm screen sharing. Here, let me bring my expert technician in here for a second. Hey, honey, will you come here and help? So you all can see the slides?
Yes.
Great, but I can't.
Oh, just click on this.
Click there?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, now I can see the slides and I can't see you all.
So click on this
Awesome.
Okay,
bar.
this one here,
No, the second from that one. There you go.
and then I can see them all.
Well, and you can scroll up and down if you want to see.
Okay.
them.
Okay, all right, well, listen, you all, I can't help but be aware of the fact that this is not any other Tuesday. It's most unusual. I know there's a tremendous amount of anxiety amongst all Americans about what's taking place right now. And about all I can say is in a democracy, we get what we deserve. So let's see let's see how the world looks tomorrow when we wake up. But I'm tickled to death to be with you all. I should never say this, but so I've been in a variety of different departments in the Warner College, and I teach at Mountain Campus. I teach range at Mountain Campus. And the wildlife students have always been my favorites. They are the hope of the future. You all are the hope of the future. And I'm just so proud of you. And I'm so glad all of you chose CSU to pursue your undergraduate education. So let me start, let me get into this topic. So when Madison contacted me, I think it was Madison, she asked if I'd give a talk, and I did, because this is my favorite talk. It's probably because I've got some skin in the game in this thing. But it's called The Wisdom of the Sierra Madre, and that's the Mexican Sierra Madre, where the two states of Chihuahua and Sonora come together. And the Sierra Madre starts just probably about 40 miles after our continental divide ends. And it runs for 700 miles through the backbone of Mexico. But anyhow, Apaches, Leopold, and the land ethic. And I got into this, I'm not quite sure how I got into this. Madison, if I blow this up, so can you guys see the slides fine then?
Yes.
You sure?
Yeah, does anybody have any issues, or can you guys all see?
Okay.
Sounds like everybody can see.
You guys, once upon a time, I had a bachelor's and master's in wildlife biology. I did the master's at the University of Washington. I went to work for the game department in the state of Washington, building a non-game wildlife program in a game department, which was an interesting experience. Anyhow, I got to know a couple of Aldo and Estella Leopold's children, who were then very successful academics. And I decided I wanted to get a PhD. I was really concerned about, I had 9 years of college in wildlife biology, and I had this very strong feeling that I had received a pretty bad education. Here I was trying to be a conservation practitioner, and I didn't feel like my 9 years of college at 3 different institutions in the Southeast, the Midwest, and the Pacific Northwest had prepared me at all for being an effective conservation practitioner. And so I thought, I'm going to go back, I'm going to get a PhD, I'm going to become an academic, and I'm going to see, I figured out what's wrong with the culture of the conservation organizations you can work for, but what's wrong with the educational system? So anyhow, the Leopold kids that I knew said, Rick, you need to go to the University of Wisconsin. That's where Dad started the whole field of wildlife biology. And in fact, just to sweeten the deal, we'll pay for your PhD. So they did. I ended up, the only stipulation is I had to live in the shack. And that's me with shorts on in front of the Leopold shack outside of Madison, Wisconsin. It's actually closer to Baraboo, Wisconsin. And getting that PhD from the wildlife department that Leopold began at Wisconsin, and then being hired at CSU, a lot of loose ends came together. And I think I, for the first time, really realized what the practice of conservation is about and how we can make it more effective. And I've been so happy to have 33 years at CSU to try to implement a lot of those ideas that various people taught me along the way. And I also did 2 books on Leopold. One, Aldo Leopold and Ecological Conscience, published by Oxford. And then the second, The Essential Aldo Leopold, published by the University of Wisconsin. And yeah, as it shows here, I was appointed to be this Leopold Leadership Fellow and stuff like that. Anyhow, it's been a remarkable journal. So Leopold's gift to the world, and it's true now because the San County Almanac, I think, appears in something like 11 languages, 11 different languages. And hopefully some of you have even found the time to read it. It was a gift, and it was this thing called the land ethic. And I just love this little quote from Aldo: acts of creation are ordinarily reserved for gods and poets, but humbler folks may circumvent this restriction if they know how. To plant a tree, for example, one need neither be God nor poet. One need only own a shovel. So he just centered us right there, centered us, our careers as conservation practitioners, and centered us with the land, the plants and the animals, the soil and the water. Okay, so what do you think it took? What life's ingredients were necessary for this person a long, long time ago, now, 60, 70, 80 years ago, to come up with this creation we call the land ethic? First of all, what it might be, we'll use Leopold's words, a land ethic reflects the existence of an ecological conscience. And this in turn reflects a conviction of individual responsibility for the health of the land. Health is the capacity of the land for self-renewal. Conservation, which is what I hope all of your careers are full of, that all of you become conservation practitioners, is our effort to understand and preserve this capacity. In other words, the land be healthy enough so it can continually renew that health and support human economies, human happiness, and human health. So anyhow, there were these formative experiences in Leopold's life that suited him to create something called the land ethic. First of all, he had an ecological perspective. So he was of a generation where ecology had just been born. So Leopold was the very first generation of ecologists, if you can believe that. Before that, they didn't understand, well, they hadn't coined the word, they didn't know what ecology was. But Leopold, so everything in Leopold's output was tempered by his training as an ecologist. And I wish nothing more for all of you than taking ecology and then taking it outdoors into the field and understanding the uncapturable complexity of the land organism, of the soils, the water, the plants, and the animals. The second ingredient, he went to work, so he graduated from Yale. Gifford Pinchot, the first chief of the U.S. Forest Service, had endowed the Yale School of Forestry. Leopold graduates from there in 1909. They ship him off to Arizona Territory. He's hired by the Forest Service. Arizona is not a state until 3 years later. He goes to work on the Apache National Forest. Then he moves over to New Mexico. New Mexico didn't become a state until 1912 as well. And has these incredible experiences in the American Southwest on public lands, working for the Forest Service, okay? Out of the blue, I have no idea why. You can talk to the kids have passed on except for Estella, his oldest daughter, his youngest daughter, named after his wife, Estella. Nobody knows why they up and quit. He quit his job with the Forest Service. He moved to Madison, Wisconsin, was hired, if you can believe this, by the Department of Agricultural Economics at the University of Wisconsin. And from there, sort of created the field of wildlife management, wildlife biology, and formed the first department. And he dies in 1948. He was only 61. Now, 61 to you all seems ancient, but 61 actually, when you think about it, is pretty darn young. Few other things. And then until he dies, he has these private lands experiences. Some of you may appreciate about 2/3 of America consists of private lands, and about 1/3 consists of public lands, the public domain. Most of those public lands are, of course, are in the American West, but about 2/3 of America, a little bit less, are private lands. They're the most biologically productive lands. They have the deeper soils, better watered, lower elevations, much more likely to be level than steep. Anyhow, while he's there, he and his brother go down to the Colorado River Delta. So the Colorado River, which starts in Colorado, it ends just before it spills into the Delta, which is the northernmost part of the Sea of Cortez. They take this canoe trip down there to the Delta in 1922. And I don't know how he knew why to go down there, but man, he went down there when it was still pristine. There were still jaguars and river otters and peregrine falcons. And it was like the 8th day of creation. And that was a formative experience because he got to see a piece of still wild land, not a piece of land that had been dominated by the sort of energy and the technology of Homo sapiens, or at least of Western Europeans now calling ourselves Americans. Anyhow, he comes back after that canoe trip. He and his family purchased this abandoned farm on the Wisconsin River near the town of Baraboo, which is beyond the town of Madison, Wisconsin, where he was teaching. They bought that in 1935. And there was no field of restoration ecology in those days, but he was curious. He was like a kid with a train set, or he was like a curious teenager with a crossword puzzle or with a jigsaw puzzle or something. He wanted to understand this incredibly complex interplay of soil, water, plants, and animals. It had been completely trashed. And he sat with his family on their weekends and their summer vacations to try to see if you could restore those deciduous forests, if you could restore the tall grass prairies, if you could restore the coniferous forests that had been there before this farmer used and wasted and then abandoned that farm. A couple other things happened. He took a trip to Germany in 1935, so leading up to the Second World War, and this was an eye-opener for him. So he was a forester. Of course, he created the field of wildlife biology, but there was already a discipline of forestry, and that's what his graduate degree in Yale was. Anyhow, he got to see how they practice forestry in Europe. And if you want to simplify it, they grew trees the way Americans grow corn, and nothing else can live. It's just you plant those conifers in single rows. If anything else comes up between them, it's poisoned. If anything tries to live in them, it's shot or exterminated. It was basically farming trees. And that sobered him up. He couldn't believe that because he had seen those forests of the American Southwest, those conifer forests, and then he had seen those vast deciduous forests of the American Midwest. Anyhow, all these things were happening to him. Lights were going on. He had this amazing mind, a type of mind you almost never see. Very unusual capacity to assimilate information and to ruminate on it long enough and to come up with original concepts. Well, the final thing, and that's what this talk is going to be about, he and his son, his brother, and a couple of close friends, Leopold was a bow hunter, not a compound bow hunter, but a wooden bow hunter. He made his own bows, long bows, made his own wooden arrows. His wife was the 5-time state champion archer, female archer in the state of Wisconsin. Leopold was a crummy shot compared to his wife, Estella, but he loved bow hunting. And so he went down to the Mexican Sierra Madre, the northernmost end of the Mexican Sierra Madre, not that far south from the Arizona-New Mexico line, from the southern border of our country. And he had these experiences that I'm going to talk about. Anyhow, he had 7 ingredients. He came up with a recipe and he called it the land ethic. And it's changed the way we think about conservation. It's almost actually been a North Star for people that are committing their lives, their careers to doing conservation that works. So let me talk about these 2 visits. The Rio Gavilan was the watershed. And I don't know if you can, guys, if you all can make this out, but maybe you can see California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and that sort of orange line, that's the US-Mexican border. And those 2 green states, one south of Arizona is Sonora, and the other one south of New Mexico is Chihuahua. And that's where this, the Sierra Madre, the state boundary between Sonora and Chihuahua, is, for 700 miles, is the Mexican Sierra Madre. And he went down there. It was the northernmost part, and there's this watershed called the Rio Gavilan. And he went down there twice to bow hunt for deer. He went down there in 1936, and then he went down there and split Christmas and New Year of 1937 and 38. And of course, he ends up dying in 1948, a year before Sand County Almanac's published. Okay, this is a quote from some of the things he wrote when he came back from visiting the Mexican Sierra Madre. And I should tell you right now, so I've spent a lot of time in the Mexican Sierra Madre. I've been working on the Mexican-American border for 28 years. And for the last 13 years, we've been doing real serious work in the Sierra Madre with the people and their connection to the land. Anyhow, so I've taken these pictures. Anyhow, to my mind, these live oak-dotted hills, fat with side oats grama, these pine-clad mesas spangled with flowers, these lazy trout streams burbling along under great sycamores and cottonwoods, come near to being the cream of creation. On our side of the line, so in Arizona and New Mexico, where we work for the Forest Service, the grama grass is mostly gone. The mesas are spangled with snakeweed, and that's a sign of intense overgrazing. And the trout streams are now cobble bars. So this quote basically gives it away. Leopold went down there to hunt for white-tailed deer in the Mexican Sierra Madre, Coues white-tailed deer now we call them. And he came back from those trips as though he had stood on the doorstep of heaven. He had seen landscapes in what he called the cream of creation, something he had never seen north of the line. Okay, this is Aldo and Estella, and that's the Apache National Forest, his first assignment, and the Carson, that was his second assignment. And there's Leopold right there on a horse, just across the Rio Grande River from Taos in this little village called Tres Piedras. And that was the headquarters for the Carson National Forest, where Aldo was the forest supervisor. Okay. Now this is another quote. In fact, this quote, I was just talking to Kurt Miney on the weekend. He's the biographer of Leopold. And I said, Kurt, this quote, somebody needs to do a master's thesis or write a term paper or do a book about this quote, because here there's this huge debate right now in the United States, it's probably global, about wilderness and what is wilderness and the role of indigenous people. There's this huge debate. Leopold always understood this. Get a load of this. It was here that all my life I had seen only sick land, whereas Mexico Sierra Madre was a biota still in perfect, and this, I should underline this, aboriginal health. The term unspoiled wilderness took on a new meaning. So I think some of you realize Leopold created the first wilderness area in the United States decades before the Wilderness Act was passed, and we started designating wilderness areas. He created, when he was working with the Forest Service, the Gila Wilderness Area, the Gila River watershed. But look what he's saying here. Aboriginal health. He was in a piece of land that he had declared was in perfect aboriginal health. All the lands he had seen on the north side in Arizona and New Mexico were sick lands. He had an experience that probably you and I will never have. He got to see a piece of land, this cream of creation in perfect aboriginal health. So he's attributing its health to indigenous people. Now, wait a second. How can there be any indigenous people? Geronimo and all those Apaches that used to occupy the Mexican Sierra Madre and the southern part of our Continental Divide and all those complex mountain ranges in Arizona and New Mexico, Geronimo was on a reservation. In fact, yeah, in those days, he was still alive. They had taken him, they put him and his warriors in a concentration camp in Florida. then shipped him out to Oklahoma. He did die there, but for 250 years, Apaches had persecuted Mexicans and had kept the northern Sierra Madre wild. But on our side of the line, all of our Apaches were in reservations. But Geronimo left the Sierra Madre in 1886. Leopold goes down there in 1935, and then December, January of 36, 37. Leopold's visits were 50 years after the Apaches had walked out of the Mexican Sierra Madre, surrendered to General Miles in Skeleton Canyon in Arizona, and they were safely put in these trains and they were shipped east to Florida, and eventually they were relocated. Most of them were to Oklahoma. Some were relocated to Apache reservations in Arizona and New Mexico. So how could Leopold have said, for the first time in his life, he had seen a piece of land in perfect Aboriginal health? There hadn't been any Apaches down there for 50 years. And why did these things that happened in Arizona and New Mexico, well, how come they hadn't already happened in the Mexican Sierra Madre? Remember, he said all he had seen in Arizona and New Mexico were sick lands, lands that had been overlogged, lands that had been overmined, lands that had been overgrazed, lands that had been overhunted. The Apaches were gone. How come the Mexicans weren't in there? They had access to the same technology. How come they hadn't spoiled it? How come the Rio Gavilan was not a sick watershed? Well, here's the rest of the story, you guys. I was on a sabbatical living in an adobe cabin with 4-foot thick walls with my wife, Heather. We were living on the Gray Ranch in the Boot Hill in New Mexico. We were about maybe 5 miles north of the line, and the Sierra Madre was our backdrop. It dominated. If you stepped outside and looked in the general southerly direction, all you saw was the Sierra Madre. It was that close. And if you look to the north, you saw the tail end of the Continental Divide, and that would be the Chiricahua Mountains. Anyhow, I was doing this sabbatical, and the owner of the Gray Ranch stopped by and visited, and he said, "Rick, you got to read this book. It's called Apache Diaries." I said, "I don't have time, Drum. I'm writing a book about beauty as a natural resource. And I've got about 50 books here I have to read, and I have to synthesize, and I have to create a book out of that." He said, "Rick, you got to read this book." So thank God I took his advice. And so this comes out of this book, you guys, and I'll read it to you. With the surrender of Geronimo in 1886, all the Apache bands were supposed to have been accounted for, either settled on reservations or in the custody of the U.S. Army as prisoners of war. Only a few people knew that there were Apaches who had never surrendered. That's right. Numbering perhaps as many as 100 in the 1890s, they were made up of 4 groups living entirely in the northern Sierra Madre of Mexico. They never spent time on American reservations. They were unknown to the U.S. Army or to reservation administrators. They were, of course, well known in Mexico, right? Because that's why all those people weren't flooding in there to cut the trees, to mine the minerals, to graze the grass, and to hunt and trap. But once the massive campaigns of the 1880s were over on our side, and the infamous Geronimo was a prisoner, the relatively few Apaches that remained did not attract nearly as much attention. So that's what happened. There were 100 or so Apaches that did not walk out with Geronimo, that had never been on reservations on the U.S. side. Our Indian problems, in quotes, were over. We had conquered them. We had put them in reservations or in that concentration camp in Fort Marion, Florida. We didn't have any issues, but the Mexicans very much realized there were still Apaches living in there. They had been persecuting the Mexicans for 250 years, and they weren't about to go in the Sierra Madre. So Leopold was just a victim of good luck. And that's what this book, Apache Diaries, is all about. The author of this book, his father was an anthropologist graduate student, and he was spending his time in the Mexican Sierra Madre trying to make contact with these last Apaches and bring them safely north, put them on reservations before the Mexicans overwhelmed them with their increasing boldness of trying to get into the Sierra Madre and despoil it. So Apaches were still being seen in the Rio Gavilan watershed 2 months after Leopold's first visit. And Leopold knew it. This is out of something that he wrote, but fear of Indians had kept the Sierra free from ranches and livestock. And for what it's worth, it kept it free from loggers and from hard rock miners. So Leopold saw what few of us will ever see. He literally slipped in a time warp. He caught it perfectly. He caught it before the Mexicans were able to dominate those remaining Apaches and cut the big trees in the Sierra Madre, mine the minerals, hunt and trap the animals, and graze the grass. And Americans didn't care about Apaches anymore. Our Indian problems, in quotes, were over. So I love this. On earth, there is no heaven, but there are pieces of it. He found one of those pieces. And I fervently believe if he had not seen that, if he hadn't taken his longbow and a handful of friends and got back down there, he wouldn't have seen this before the last Apaches disappeared. So Leopold historians, all these people who have written all these books on Aldo, had missed this because nobody knew until this book Apache Diaries was published in 2000. Nobody knew about this. Honest to God. I have no idea. So I owe Drum Hadley a huge gift. Okay, now for the rest of the story. Okay, so this is the Leopold family. There's Nina, their oldest daughter, Carl, their youngest son, his wife, Estella, right there, who I got to meet before she died when I was doing my PhD. Starker, the oldest one, he was a professor at Berkeley. Luna, next to the oldest, and Estella Jr., the youngest of the Leopold 5 kids. Okay, some questions, you guys. Question 1, how did Leopold even know about the Rio Gavilan? How in the world did he even know that there was a watershed down there in the northern Sierra Madre called the Rio Gavilan, and why did he go down there? Well, there's another part to the story. This is Carl Lumholtz. He was a Norwegian adventurer, and he was the first person that we know in the sense that he did it and then wrote a book about it called Unknown Mexico, which came out in 1907. He took an expedition the entire length of the Mexican Sierra Madre, all 700 miles. And this little quote I have is out of his book, Unknown Mexico. We soon found out that in the river Gavilan, and so he's spelling it the way it sounds. He's not spelling it the way it actually is spelled. So in the river Gavilan, some 4 miles south of our camp, there were immense quantities of fish. No one ever interfered with them. Never have I seen at any place where deer were so plentiful. Almost at every turn, one of them might be seen. At one time, we had 15 hanging in the kitchen, so in their camp, 15 deer. One morning, our best marksman brought in 3 specimens of that superb bird, the largest woodpecker in the world. This was the imperial woodpecker, which is even bigger than the ivory-billed woodpecker. Both are extinct now. So he was in this place. There were grizzly bears down there. There were wolves down there. There were imperial woodpeckers. They're red, white, and black. They're about 1.5 feet tall, if you can imagine that. Bigger, like I said, than our ivory-billed. But place was crawling with white-tailed deer. So in those days, you guys, you could pretty much read. You could master the literature on certain topics. There were so many fewer people, so many fewer books. And I have no doubt that Leopold glommed onto this book, Unknown Mexico, as soon as it was published. And being the avid deer hunter and hearing this, there were 15 Coues whitetails hanging in the kitchen in camp. You know, they were deer. They would look right and they'd see a deer. They'd look left and they'd see a deer. He said, let's go down there. And it's just south of the border. It won't even be that hard to get to. There's some Mormon ranchers down there, and I'll make contact and they'll pack our whole outfit in. So I'm pretty sure this is the reason, again, just pure circumstance, that Lumholtz, this Norwegian explorer, did the trip and wrote a book, and it was published in English, which is even better. Leopold read it and he said, that's what I'm looking for. I'm tired of going down there and hunting on those sick lands of Arizona and New Mexico. And guess what? Geronimo's stronghold was the Rio Gavilan as well. Corral de los Indios, the lower gorge. So there's a lower gorge of the Rio Gavilan and there's an upper gorge. And this was even Geronimo's hangout. Anyhow. Question 2, what happened to those Apaches? You remember Geronimo walks out with 32 others and the Apache problems are over. What happened to this up to 100 Apaches that didn't walk out with him that stayed there? They were still there at least as late as the 1930s when Leopold was down there. Well, we don't know what happened to them, but this is what Granville Goodwin's son wrote about in Apache Diaries. So he wrote about his father, Granville. After Granville Goodwin's last visit to the Sierra Las Huelas, which is just north of the Rio Gavilan, in 1931, there were reports of contact with the Apaches through the 1930s. By the end of the decade, so 1940, contact ended, and it seems they had disappeared either through death or emigration. In other words, they may have just walked out. Anecdotal information suggests that the remaining Apaches were still living in family groups in the Sierra Madre as late as the 1940s. Other accounts suggest the remaining Apaches assimilated with the Tarahumara Indians to the south or with the Pima to the north. So that's pretty interesting too. And of course, nobody was around to document the last wild Bronco Apache. Question 3. Did any Leopolds ever return to the Rio Gavilan, this place in perfect Aboriginal health, this place that was the cream of creation? Yes, 2 Leopolds did return. This is Aldo and Estella's oldest son, Starker. He got his PhD at Berkeley. They hired him to be a professor of wildlife management in the field that his father started. And he went with his dad on that first bow hunting expedition. And he remembered the wolves howling at night. He remembered the place crawling with deer. He remembered all this. And like any good academic in wildlife biology, he said, I just got hired at Berkeley, got my PhD. I'm going to start a long-term study on the dynamics between predator and prey. And I'm going to do it down in the Rio Gavilan. So I'll quote his writing, he went down there to initiate long-term studies of the native fauna under virgin conditions. So he missed that. His father got it correct. Aboriginal health. It was the Apaches that were keeping it virgin or pristine in quotes. Of particular interest would be an investigation of the balance between deer and their natural predators, wolves and mountain lions. I hopefully visualized years of intermittent work in the Gavilan Basin. And that picture on the right is him preparing a specimen. It's a Gould's turkey that he harvested when he was down there. So anyhow, he goes down there and his heart is broken, as ours would be if the same thing happened to us. And he writes this essay called Adios Gavilan. So he goes down there and he sees this. This is one of the pictures he took. It's a logging truck with these big, either Apache, Chihuahuan, or Ponderosa pines. The loggers had not reached the particular area where we hoped to camp, but they were working in that direction from 3 sides. We knew then that instead of initiating an era of renewed acquaintance with the wilderness, we had come to witness its passing. I would like to think there is another river filtering off hillsides of golden grama grass and winding under virgin pine. May my son someday explore, sexist writing, my apologies, ladies. May my son someday explore its rim rocks and imagine there are still Apaches in its tributaries. So yeah, it broke his heart. He went down there. But remember, you guys, I said 2 Leopolds returned. The second one was Jed Munier, Aldo and Estella's great-grandson, and my last PhD, well, not my last PhD graduate student, but next to the last. So that's Jed and I. In 2008, so my wife and I had been with friends, had been working in the Mexican Sierra Madre, in the northernmost Sierra Madre, trying to find some of the remnants of these Apache camps and just exploring the land, hanging out with the ranchers that were down there grazing cows. But we were sensing if we went just a little bit further south, the roads ended. And let me tell you, the roads down there are not worth calling a road. They're scary. If you get in and then get out, consider yourself born lucky. So anyhow, Jed was looking for a PhD project, and I said, I speculated, Jed, I think if we walk just a little bit further south through those canyons and mesas, we may come upon some stands of conifers that have never been logged. And they did. As soon as those Apaches were taken care of, the loggers went in there with mules and double-bladed axes and sharpening stones, and they had at it. And you could see the stumps from all that intensive logging in the 1940s and 50s. And the roads were super critical, I mean, super bad, but we were on foot. So I thought, we'll just keep walking south and see if we can find it. And guys, we found him. So that's Jed on the left, and that's me standing up there on the right with the cowboy hat on. And that mesa that we're looking at is in the center of this picture. And I don't know if you can make it out, but that mesa is crowned with conifers. Hopefully you guys can see them. And actually, if you start looking a little bit closer, you can see some conifers in the foreground. So on that trip, we ran out of time. It was during spring break, had to get back to teach classes, but we went down there over Thanksgiving. We had more time, and we headed straight in there. And guess what? Didn't see any stumps. There were no more remnants of the old logging roads for the mule logging. We stopped finding graves for the loggers that didn't walk out, that got killed in the process of cutting those trees, et cetera, et cetera. And we found him, and Jed got to do his PhD. We went back in with chainsaws and took fire scars, and Jed got to do his PhD on what a forest looks like that's never been interfered with. Think about all the forests on our side of the line. We have actively managed, well, we have mismanaged them, right? Because we've suppressed fire and built homes all through them and stuff like that. So Jed wrote this paper published in Ecology. You know, it's basically a paper that nobody else could write because nobody knew this story, and nobody knew there were still stands down there that had never seen a logger's axe. There were no roads in there. There weren't any ranches or villages or anything else. And he graduated with his PhD. That's me and my wife, and Jed and his wife, Tricia. Okay, question 4, the last question. What of the Rio Gavilan today? Well, I got together with John Hatch. That's this guy wearing a cowboy hat. His grandparents were the Mormon ranchers that packed Aldo and his hunting buddies in there on those 2 trips. And I asked John, got in touch with John Hatch, and I asked him if he'd take us into the Rio Gavilan. And in 2012, we went in there. And this is what it looks like today. Now, I don't know if any of you guys can tell really healthy from unhealthy rivers, but it's basically cobble bars. The trees are all cut. The water's diverted to irrigate crops. We couldn't get into the lower gorge of the Gavilan. We could just get into the upper. There was a drug cartel in the lower gorge, and they had the dirt road. It was barricaded and with armed guards, so you couldn't get into the lower gorge. But we walked the entire length of the upper gorge. Not very healthy. And guess what we saw? So this is what we encountered driving in. And when it wasn't barreling down the highway trying to run you over, this is what it looked like. So they're still logging it. Of course, none of it's pristine. It's all second growth. So guys, that's the story. That Rio Gavilan, Leopold did a time warp. He slipped into a crack in time that people didn't know existed. It was just good luck on his part. Burning curiosity, you know, to hunt deer in the Mexican Sierra Madre. Anyhow, he was there for a brief window before all those people that would come and exploit the land, you know, and log on a non-sustainable basis, graze on a non-sustainable basis, had turned it into sick land. Now, what about us? I want to end with sharing this quote with you, and I'll tell you why, and this is totally off subject, you guys. But I understand because I teach. And the thing that you all don't appreciate when you're sitting there in the classroom is the teacher can see every one of you, can see your right and your left hands, is actively engaged with you, is fascinated with you, cares so much about you being successful and having wonderful careers as conservation practitioners. But sometimes older people get a little bit concerned because of this burning curiosity we have toward technology. And so I came on this quote. What I want to give you is a very hopeful message where you should never, and I hope none of you are ever feeling guilty about being in love with our smartphones. That isn't going to take anything away from you having an incredible career in conservation. And so let's just go through this quote together. And I'm apologizing for Leopold. In those days, it seems like all men writers wrote with a sexist bent. So in a surprising number of people, not men, there burns a curiosity about machines and a loving care in their construction, maintenance, and use. Everybody knows this. Think about that. This was in 1939. But what few realize is that an equal bent for the mechanisms of nature is a possible earmark of some future generation. And you know what? That's your generation. You don't have to divorce your smartphone. You do not have to abandon technology. Bring it along with you. The hope for all of us on this planet to try to restore its health so people can have good health, can enjoy its beauties, can have economies associated with the wise use, the sustainable use of natural resources. The only thing your generation needs to do is match that curiosity in the construction, maintenance, and use of technology, match it with an equal bent for the mechanisms of nature, how plants, animals, soil, and water function, and then bend your back into doing that kind of good work. So you don't have to feel guilty. It's not the end of the world when you hear old people bemoaning about younger people and this addiction to their smartphones. No, just match it with an equal enthusiasm for the construction, maintenance, and use of the land organism. And the land ethic is the North Star on trying to figure that out. So thank all of you. I'm so sad I can't see your faces. I don't even know if you're watching. You're probably following the election. But Remy and Madison, thank you very much for the chance to be here.
Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. And that was an amazing talk. I was very interested. I'm sure if we could all clap for you in a more organized way, we would. So I'll just speak for everyone. Oh, there you go. Caroline has, I don't even know how to do that. Oh, yes.
Well, oh, thank you.
Wait, how do you do it?
Well, listen, I wish all of us well. I have so much respect for you all. You've made this lifetime commitment to practice conservation. Oh, I'm going to get emotional, sorry. Remy or Madison may know I have kind of a problem with that sometimes, but anyhow, thank you for the opportunity. Go off and enjoy the evening, and let's keep our fingers crossed for positive outcomes, no matter what side of the spectrum you all lean on. Okay?
Alrighty.
Adios.
Alrighty, have a good one, Rick. Thank you so much for
Bye.
coming by. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It was my pleasure, Remy. Thank you. Good night.
Alrighty, have a good
Thank
one.
you, sir. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
For those of you still here, a few things to shout out. Everyone left fast. If you are interested at all in our elections, there will be an email posted later tonight. And of course, you can ask questions to me or Maddie through the chapter's email. So if you're interested at all about with the election, like by all means, submit, your submission. I'm trying to find the right word, but go ahead, submit. If you're just interested, submit. You can always back out, but I highly recommend it. I surprised myself when I'd like to be a coffee table manager, and it ended up being a fantastic experience and opportunity for me. So just if you're at all interested, go ahead. And then we also have raptor monitoring this Sunday. Hopefully I see some of you guys there. And yeah, with that, thank you for sticking along. This is a really fun meeting. Rick Knight's fantastic, so I'm glad that you all got to experience one of his talks. It's great. But yeah, with that, thank you. You guys have a good night. And I'll stick around for a little bit if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Hey, Remy, question.
Yeah, sure. Dakota.
I might have dozed off, but for those committee positions, did y'all have like a list of maybe responsibilities? I'm interested, but I don't want to like do something that might be overwhelming.
Oh,
Still
for
kind of
sure.
getting calibrated.
Yeah, so the committee positions, those include, let me add that up. So that includes the membership committee, the programs and activities committee, the education information committee, and the fundraising committee.
Yeah.
Membership, essentially, you take care of our social media accounts. You go out there and you contact people and put our posts up, take care of our YouTube channel. Programs and activities, you help us organize and arrange, schedule our work days and work trips, and raptor monitoring is part of that. Education information is trying to get together with schools and CSU campus and trying to work out, cool opportunities that we might be able to do. And that includes our camera trap project, school visits. Fundraising is basically what you're in charge of our coffee table. You manage it if we manage to run it, and you kind of promote merchandise / design merchandise and all of that. Yeah, and then president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer.
I'm not ready for those. It's okay.
It's all good. I've got more in detailed descriptions on that poll tonight, and you're free to look at that if you want. And if you have any more questions, I can answer that for you. But
okay, for the committees, is it like kind of like your responsibility to outline those events? Like, I know, like I was charity committee for my fraternity, and like I had to do that stuff. It wasn't like, hey, do this. Like, I mean, it was easy because it was like a ritual thing in the sense that we did it like every year. But for like the education one, that was one I was a little interested in, and it like, would I know what is expected of me if I tried to pursue that one?
Yeah, so for that one, I feel like for the most part, it's going to be helping, because I think Isabel is going to try to stay in that position. And with committees, I'm gonna take the week to decide this and announce it, and but in our bylaws, it doesn't state that we can only have one person per committee. So
Yeah.
we could probably allow multiple people within the committee. If you join the Education Information Committee, you are basically going to be helping out Isabel with her camera trap project. And what that mostly consists of is checking cameras once a month, once we start that up, and going through the photos and labeling them as bear, mountain lion, kid, dog.
But you said Isabella's trying to stay in that position, because if that's the case, like I have no experience with that. Like I'm not trying to like run any kind of train, so like I'd rather like, I know you can't do co-chairs, but I'd rather like just try to get involved with her and like see what's up.
Oh yeah, for sure. If you're interested in the CC camera trap project, I can give you her email, and that's something that's open to all members. Being a part of that chair is really just helping her organize it. So you might just help her with, like, she takes half the schools and you take the other half of schools. But
yeah, I can email her.
Yeah, I'll give you her. I'll send it into the chat right now.
Okay.
Actually, right there. So just let her know I'm from TWS. I'm interested in the camera trap project. Should love to have you on. Right now, we're not doing too much because we're actually trying to integrate it with the Lincoln Park Zoo and their urban wildlife program. There's kind of a transfer of responsibilities going on right now with that whole project. But hopefully by next semester, things will be figured out and we'll be able to really kick things off. It's going to be super exciting.
Hopefully.
Yeah, we'll
Right.
see. Things can be slow over emails, and you never know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'll definitely email her, and if you need anything, just let me know. I'm just trying to get a little more involved next semester.
For sure. Yeah.
I'll still be like I said, trying to calibrate like this adult life and school, but definitely trying to get a lot more involved next semester. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, would love to see you stick around and do stuff with us.
Yeah, and then last question, Raptor monitoring. It's just gonna be a normal like survey question from in the email to sign
Yeah,
up. Or, okay.
it's basically just name, phone number. Are you cool to carpool? Are you cool to drive? And then just an explanation as to kind of how things go. It's super nonchalant. So.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for the meeting. That was an awesome
All right.
speaker. I'm glad we
Yeah.
all got that to happen.
Rick
It was
Knight's
really cool.
fantastic. I'm glad you got to encounter. So many people just missed out on him going through CCs, but I'm glad that he was able to come to one of our meetings.
Yeah, that was awesome passion he speaks with.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, I'll see you around,
Yeah.
Dakota. Thanks for sticking around.
Yeah, thank you for the information. Y'all have a good one.
Alrighty. Have a good one. And so as soon as this stops, it will start downloading for both of us. Hopefully one of us gets it.
I'll send you a picture this time.
Sure, yeah. I'll just, if it downloads for me, I'll immediately upload it to the Google Drive.
Okay.
All right, sweet. Well, then I'll see you next week.